Hello everyone. In today's video, I would explain how you can introduce agile methodology in PEGA development by using something called Azure Boards. Now, PEGA supports, as of version 8.7.0, Jira as their default and only project management tool. And while technically possible, there are severe restrictions while using any other tool for project management. In this video, we will see if and how we can overcome these challenges. There are three aspects to this video. Number one, integrating with Azure Boards using Postman. Number two, integrating with Azure Boards from within PEGA. And number three is using that integration for actual project management from within PEGA. How do we handle all these things? Let's find out. Now, before we delve into the technical bits, let's try to understand how Azure Boards function. Inside Azure Boards, I've created a set of work items which are called issues, and I'm using these work items to kind of track what POCs I'm doing and what is the state of every POC. As you can see here, for example, I have this one POC which I am going to be doing for upgrading my personal edition, right? So that I have not started yet, so it is still in need to do. DX API, for example, I can say it is in progress. So something like this, right? Now, what I'm also doing is I actually have created something called an epic. That is another type of work item. And this epic I am using as a parent for all the child work items I have created, each of them corresponding to one specific POC that I want to do, right? So that is the broad structure. Now, what I want to do is whenever I, let's say, do any kind of coding within PEGA, I should be able to, whenever I'm checking in the code, I should be able to associate that code and or the check-in with any of these child cases. I mean, like child work items. So once I'm able to do that, then I would be able to also go back and say, yes, this is indeed, for example, this checking was done because of, let's say, Azure Keyword integration, or let's say Amazon Alexa integration. How we will do it? Let's see. Now, the first step before we go into any of the technical bits is that we have to create something called a personal access token. Now this personal access token is what is going to identify you to any other downstream system, so that you can use your credentials to log in and be able to kind of perform these functionalities, right? How do you create that? So you have to go to this Azure Boards option here inside Azure and click on the personal access tokens. When you click on personal access tokens, you can see that I've already created two extra access tokens, but I can create one more if I want to. Now here I will call it test2, and then you can have a token for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or you can define a custom number. It can be 45 or 65, whatever it is, but it can never be more than 90. So for now I'm giving 90 days max, and here you can choose what scope your token would allow you to do. So for example, if you only want to do read, right, and you don't want to do any kind of update or delete or create, then you can only select the read options. So then what will happen is the token would only allow you to do read mechanisms, and any write mechanisms will be rejected. I don't have any such problems right now, so what I will do is I will use the full access, because I need, of course, I need to kind of not only read, I also want to kind of get data to update at a later point maybe. So I will simply choose full access, and when I click on create, you can see this screen comes up and this token is shown here. So this token will only be shown once, and after this you can never see this token again. So you need to copy this and put it somewhere safe so that you can access it again. Okay, now once I copy this token and I'll put it somewhere else, I would then go into Postman. Now in Postman, what I've done is I've downloaded a public collection, and I've made some changes on it. So I mean, what I've done is I had to go through every one of them to see which one actually kind of suits my requirement. So yeah, so this one is public. I would give the collection document in the link somewhere in the video. But and you can, of course, if you want to, you can go through the entire collection. But here, for our sake, what we will do is we will simply use the main endpoint which I'm going to use to kind of do this integration. Now, as you can see here, this one is the one that I've used mainly. This one has a set of parameters. These parameters can be seen here on the environments. You can see all the values set here. I would not go through all of them, but some of them are self-explanatory. For example, coreServer is the URL devs.azure.com. The organization is your organization name, which you will get from here. If I go back, you can see the organization settings. You can see this is the name of my organization, which is my name. And then you have the project. Again, I have the same name. If I go back to Azure, you can see I have this project. And then you have to give your this other part, and then you have to give a work item ID. I'll come to this. Okay. And then everything else is exactly the same. This one API version is usually given as 7.0. I have given it as 7.0 because that is the latest version that is present. Okay. And the work item I'll come to. Okay. Now what happens here is you need to first get the work item ID for the main epic that you have. Right. So the backlog, as I mentioned before, the epic is the main umbrella parent item that is present, and everything is linked underneath it, right? So I will just go to this, and you can see here that this work item equal to 1 is present. So which means the item's ID is 1. So now once I remember this, I'll come back here. I'll give the work item ID as 1. I can choose to give it as 1 here. This is work item ID, and I've given it as 1. This is an environment which you have to choose. I think by default, I think it's no environment, but you have to choose Azure DevOps environment. And then in the authorization, you have to give your basic username and then access token. This is done by using basic auth. Parameters, this is all previously configured. You don't have to do anything else. You have just import the collection and then start using it. Now, once I do this, and if I click on send, you can see I can now get a response back. What I'm getting is a set of relations options here. You can see this URL list I'm getting. These are all the child data which I have. Okay. Now again, there is a small trick here which needs to be understood, is that and that is the part where I spend most of my time. How do I, for example, get the relationship between an epic and the multiple work items underneath it, right? That is the part I spent about 2-3 hours just trying to find out which endpoint would kind of work, and I found this workaround. And this is not really, I don't know why, but Azure is not very clear on how they are defining it. But what I've done is I've used this endpoint, and I have to pass this $expand equal to relations. Once you pass it, you will see all the information is now coming back. You can see 9, 19, 27. All of these are individual, individual work items, issues underneath the epic, right? So I'm passing the work item as 1, and I'm getting back all the list of work items underneath it, number 1. Then what I've done is I have used another one here. This is the one, I think. Yeah, so here what I've done is, again, if I, for example, pass here, if I pass, let's say, or for example, I can use the same thing. I can use the same, it's the same exact URL, but the only difference is I can just pass all here like this, okay? And then I can pass the work item ID as, let's say, 23. As you can see, the number is 23 here, right? So I'll just go back to the environment variables, and I'll just change this to 23. If I pass now 23 and I'm passing all, you will see this information is coming back. I don't know why this is giving every time, but it's actually working correctly, and you can see that the value is coming back. So for example, 23, it will show you that Azure key vault integration within PEGA. If I, for example, choose any other number, you can see that, yeah, let me see if I can choose it. If I choose 28, for example, you can see that it gives you all the data that you need. It gives you the data that from that specific add connection to external schema. So you have to call the same endpoint twice, because the same endpoint does not give you with this parameter expand. You have to call it once with relations and once with all, and that will give you all the data that you need in order for you to kind of give you a set of items inside PEGA for your agile methodology to work. Right. So that is effectively what needs to be done from Postman, right? So now that you know that it's working from Postman, what are the things that I have to do in PEGA? That is the next step. Now, inside PEGA, what I've done is I've created a component. This actually was already created by me before for doing something called Azure Key Vault integration. There's a video for it in my channel. You can go and see it. So this one actually I've just renamed it now, and I'm calling it Azure-based integration. So whatever integrations I do with Azure, everything would fall into this component. And I've created a new rule set called Azure, and I am putting in a connect rest inside it. The connect rest creation, it's fairly straightforward. I will not do I will not show that. But what is done is it's effectively mimicking whatever we have here. It's exactly the same. The only small difference that I have done is I have not kind of use the core server parameter as it's shown here in the Postman. I have kind of just hard coded it as dev.azure.com. I'm not going into hard environments, so if I was going in hard environments, I would probably have, let's say, had it. But POC server, it will always going to be dev.azure.com, so I've kept it as such. And also all the other parameters, organization, project, work items, work item ID, everything is kept as is, and they have to be passed as part of your request. Otherwise, this will not work. Nothing else is done here. This expand API version is automatically created and generated and added to your get method. The only other difference, which is uh, something which needs to be done, is you need to also facilitate the authorization or the authentication part. This one here is basics. What I've done is I've created an authentication profile called Azure profile. This is basic type, and as you can see, the ID here is basic, so I've kept it as basic. And I've set the password. The password would be my access token, the access token which we have just created. And then just save it. Nothing else is required to be done, right? Once this is done, what I've done is I've created a data page. The data page, I mean, there are two layers of data page. I'll show that one by one. The first one is this get work items. Inside it, the get work items connect rest is being called, and there is a request and there's a response. The request does nothing fancy. It just sets all these values from this data page call itself. As you can see, organization, project, all of these are now kind of made as a parameter, and they are just setting the value. API version I've hard coded, but again, this can be made into a parameter also if I want to. And then in the response, just mapping all the information. But what the only trick that small trick I'm doing is I'm not using the entire URL. I am just taking the part which is after the last slash, which is the work item. As you can see here, the work item structure is like this, that it gives you this, sorry, this one. You can see here relations. You can see or everything after the last slash is the work item number. So I've just used that. Okay. And then I put it into this column called PYID. I don't want to create a new property, so I reuse the PYID property which is present in base class. So once this is done, what I'm doing is I'm just calling this. What this does is it just gets the first set of records out. Okay. So what I will do is I'll just pass the epic ID, and you can see I'm getting the response IDs back, the relation values, and you can see all the links are present. But as you can see here, the actual value is not present. I mean the actual description which I'm going to be using, that is not present. Now you might ask the question, okay, why are you going to be doing this relations once and then all again, right? Shouldn't all give you everything? Yes, I also have the same idea that all should give everything, but it's not. But as you can see, the relations option, right, as you can see here, the relations only gives you, if I click this option here, okay, it only gives me a set of values, but it unfortunately only gives a URL, nothing else. All the related values, it only gives a URL. So if you, for example, want to get, let's say, sorry, I think I'm showing it wrongly. If I go out, you can see it doesn't give the actual relations correctly. What it does is it only gives the current, I mean the normal value. If you give it as expand, only then is it giving all the sorry, not expand, sorry, relations. Only then it is giving me all the downstream of all the child what relations. Okay. Yeah, I'll just close it. I think I made some mistake. Let me close this, go back here, and if I click on this, you can see this is coming because there are test results attached to it. Oh, sorry, I know why it's not coming. Okay. That's what I was thinking. Why is it only coming? This is 28. So 28 is a child, so there is no parent underneath it. If I click on relations, you will see that it is only giving the links and nothing else, right? So I have to first get the link, get the work idea out of it, and then again use that same URL, but now with the all, to kind of get all the system values. Because the problem here is that if you only say relations, then the main attribute, which is the description called system.workTitle, is not present here, as you can see. But if I give it as all, the system work title is added here, system.title, sorry. But this title, is not present if I give it as relations. So I have to hit it. I have to first get individual work IDs and then call that API again to kind of get the individual system title values. So what I've done is I first call this to kind of get the list of work IDs, as I just showed. This one is giving you the list of IDs, and then what I've done is I have created one more data page called get work item list. And here also what I'm doing, it's fairly simple. It's just setting the value again, and then it's looping through all of these relation values, and then again setting the all data scope, and then the work item ID, and then setting the value inside the py note and py ID. I've just used the existing properties. So if I, for example, simply pass the epic ID here, and if I run this, it takes a bit of time because it's actually kind of calling the API multiple times to get all the data. You can see that all of these are present within PEGA. So all of the numbers and everything is now coming out. Now we do the last part of the POC. How do we integrate the Azure Boards data that we have just got using our data page into our project management and into our development work? Now there are two places in which you can use it. The first one I tried was with Agile Workbench here. It was not very successful because the entire thing is very tightly coupled with Jira. You cannot really change it. If anyone has been able to kind of modify this page, do let me know how you have done it, and I will gladly also integrate it here. But I have not been able to make any changes or any headway here. It's a very tightly coupled like component or a widget which is being used only with Jira. The second part which I've used, which is slightly less useful, I sense, but it's still, I think, kind of workable, is using the work items association while doing a code check-in. Now what I've done is, before I show that, there are some things which needs to be done. First is this Agile Workbench integration with Jira component from PDN has to be downloaded. Okay, and then you would see that I have added it here as part of my components. Now you might ask the question, okay, if you are integrating with Azure Boards, why have you downloaded and installed Jira integration as part of your application stack, right? I'll explain that. Okay. Now, once this is done, what happens is you then have to, let's say, just call that data page somewhere and then kind of use it to kind of show a list of Azure Boards items, right? Now, where do you do it? Now, the only place which I found was kind of usable is, let's show you this. We open a data transform. It is this place, this work item to associate option, as you can see here, right? Here you can add um, your Azure Boards work item number, right? Now, how do you customize this? The problem here is the entire thing that you have see here, this entire activity, this BZ work bench assets from int system, this section, everything is final. You cannot change anything here. Okay. The only place that you can change is inside here. There is this one extension activity given called py bench assets from int system. This one, and this also I have of course customized it, but this is only present within Jira integration and PEGA app definition. And this, even this activity is only triggered if you have this when rule true, and you of course cannot change anything here, right? You cannot change the when rule, you cannot change the activity, so you cannot even, for example, go and make this disabled. So you have to go with the flow, right? You cannot change anything. And I have seen that if I, for example, remove this Jira integration component, what happens is this property here in application page, this py py project management something something. Let's see what is that. Py project management in it, py project management enabled. This becomes true if I add it. Sorry, if it's not added, then it does not work. And so what I've done here is I had to add this, and then only then I'm seeing that this when rule is getting, so I'm like coming out as true. This part, py project management is not equal to blank, and then this is coming as Jira only if this project management system, this one, right? These two are coming as Jira only if I add it here in my application. There is, I think, some sort of a trigger somewhere which is kind of adding that property in my application. I have to check that how it's happening. But if I, for example, remove this, then what happens is this activity does not even call this, and it gets skipped from here. So I had to add it. Very weird, I know, but that is how the code is. But inside, once you go inside the code, then the rest is pretty simple. Then I've just added this activity here called in my Azure component rule set. I have just set it all the Azure note, the property which is the description, and the Azure ID here. ID is the ID, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever ID is, and the description is the actual description, the short description. And then I have just added it into the data page which is populating this list, the list that you saw here, the list right here, right? So you can just see it here. There is this data page, d underscore pz workbench assets. Again, everything is completely immutable, and you cannot change it. So py work item ID with label, this property has to be used to show whatever you are going to be using, right? So as you can see, I have already done that here. I've added py work item ID with label. So if I go back to this rule, and if I click on this down button, you can see all these values are now coming up. Okay. If I add JFrog Artifactory, I'm just adding it and I just check it in. I should be able to check it in. See? So that is how it is done. It is not a very, it's not a very good integration. I would have wanted to have do it in a better way. But I found that there are some other URLs which we can use to kind of add work items and, for example, update work items. So ideally, what should happen maybe in later versions of PEGA is you should be able to kind of give a work item ID whenever you are, let's say, doing any kind of, whenever you're creating a branch, you also get an option to kind of create a work item ID, and if you choose it, then you will be able to, it'll automatically create a work item with some data. And then once that happens, then everything else kind of, and then you would be able to kind of update it. You can also update peer review data. Everything should be happening directly using PEGA. But the problem with the current situation in PEGA is it is so tightly coupled with Jira. Any integration with any other board is very, very difficult. I was just trying to see if I could use it. It was not a very satisfactory integration, as you can see. But if you want to use it and you have Azure Boards in your application, and you have to show some kind of a linkage between your PEGA coding as well as your Azure board update, you have to use this. The other thing which I also want to do is, let's say whenever you update this, right? Let's say whenever I'm adding this value, but once I add it, then I should also be able to do, let's say, bi-directional update or the other update on the other way, and kind of show some kind of an update on the status of this work item, right? That is something I'll also do, but I'll not probably create a video for it. I can just give some updates on that. But probably I will also see if I can also work on that. Maybe like, whenever, let's say, let's say one rule, or let's say one branch is let's say completed, and let's say pending for review, then automatically the work item associated with that POC also gets pending review. And then once it's completed review, then automatically it also becomes closed, something like that. So that kind of a bi-directional update actually is the best way to do it. But the problem with Pega's integration at the moment is, number one, it's very tightly coupled with Jira, and second is it is mostly final rule. So I have to find a way to do it. But this is, I think, the first step. So let's see. So as of now, I will end the video here. If you like my video, do like, share, subscribe. And until the next video, bye bye.